Hello and welcome to a new show here. No, it is not the NBA Today dude, but, well, it is that guy, but we're doing a new show. It's called Beyond the Box Score with Cameron and Nick, our first ever show. What we're going to do here is break down things, not the actual games itself, but bigger issues, steroids, gambling, the big things in sports that really don't get talked about all the time, and we want to bring light to it. And Nick Rice, I can guarantee you something today that we won't be talking about David Akers.
That's a definite relief. But thank you guys for joining us on Spreaker.com. Definitely glad you guys can watch another show. And actually, before we get started here, I do want to add that if you guys want to chime in as far as leaving a comment or a question, you can text or call at 951-515-4552. Make sure to leave your thoughts or feedback. Also, you can use the message board on Spreaker.com, National Sports Radio page, and can contact us there throughout the duration of the show. Thanks, guys.
One of the biggest things in sports, and not just about sports, but in life, a lot of people have been talking about this on social media. It's basically gone crazy. Riley Cooper of the Philadelphia Eagles made a huge splash with an inappropriate and racist comment, saying, quote, "I will fight every N-word here." He said this at a concert. He was really disappointed. Several tweets and apologizing, but look, I don't condone the use of the N-word. I know a lot of people use it in a funny tone, and I know that's what it's now used for today, but he was showing so much anger that was really unnecessary. Look, I don't support this at all, and I think most people shouldn't either. What do you think?
Well, obviously, this is a guy with the Jeremy Maclin injury, and the fact that Deshaun Jackson has gone, his production has gone south over the last few years. Riley Cooper was supposed to be the up-and-comer, one of those slot receiver guys, now with holes in the lineup. And listen, this is a similar situation to where I've heard from numerous sources that have talked about this issue, and they come to a really good point that not all words are necessarily the same. Not because that word has been used and has been publicized on specific shows and throughout life. It's a word that hasn't gone away. And I saw from a quote here. I'm going to use my best to paraphrase this from Oprah Winfrey. She mentioned, this was from a month ago, about the N-word, and she mentioned that I don't use that word because of the implications of that. And our new day and age, they don't exactly know the implications or what exactly that word means. Because for a lot of people, for a lot of African Americans, centuries ago, during the slavery age, typically the N-word would be the last a word that they would hear hanging from a tree. I mean, it's just a very sad situation for America to be using it so bluntly and so out in the open. It's such a recognized, and it's a term that hasn't really been condoned to the level that I would think of. But I'm not going to lose sleep over a one slip up here by a wide receiver. He obviously, in my mind, I think he is sincere in his apology, but I never really feel the need to use the word. And if anyone has a rebuttal about how they really need the word, they've obviously lost their mind. This is a sad scenario for a receiver that was supposed to be the main wideout in this offense now, with injuries in the lineup. I just don't see the use of the word, but a very sad situation nonetheless.
What I think, it just, for Riley Cooper, I understand the apologies, and he's done a pretty good job with the statements, but again, I think that the NFL, I'm not talking about the Eagles themselves, but I think the NFL should suspend him for maybe one preseason game or something. Just just to add on a little bit, just add on a little lesson here, but, and you could probably speak to this too. I mean, you step outside in the public, in the, in the real world, and people use that term in kind of a jokingly, and it doesn't really matter what skin color, people use it in a jokingly way, saying like, hey buddy, I don't know if you've seen this a lot, but do you know what I'm trying to say here?
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely a sad scenario. I mean, there was actually at one point I heard from a year or two ago on NBC, there was a show that actually won an Emmy, and the title included the Q word, Queer. I mean, that's another word that's obviously it has a very negative connotation. It's been used, in my mind, way too much. It's just a word that sticks around, and we don't really need that in society.
Let's move on to the NFL. Man, a lot of people have been saying, the NFL, yes, they're making a ton of money, but their ticket sales haven't been that great. I say personally that it's okay because they're making so much TV money from NFL Red Zone, Sunday Ticket, and you got NFL Network doing Thursday Night Football. You can never go without football now. I mean, there's football everywhere you go. Do you see it as a problem that this sport, to some people, has become a TV sport?
I don't know if that's necessarily a problem. I see football as finally a sport that reaches out to the people. It's ahead of its time. We're looking at problems from baseball now with their lack of instant replay and how it doesn't tap the resources it has with technology. In fact, there are lacrosse games that have instant replay that baseball doesn't. There are certain sports that are so frustrating and are losing the youth fan base because of its lack of technology. And in my mind, I just think that football, with the situation that it has, it's trying to tap into as many people as possible and reach the needs of a generation that is switching from the old age of technology into a TV-based America. Obviously, obviously, like the most watched sport in America is obviously football, far and away, because it just taps so many people and so many lifestyles.
Yeah, I think it relates so well to the American public. And personally, I don't want to pay, or I don't think most Americans would want to pay X amount of dollars to see a guy with no shirt on, 55-year-old beer belly man, distracting you from seeing Tom Brady throw a game-winning touchdown in Section 301. I just don't think fans want to go through that experience, pay the parking, the overpriced hot dogs. Just stay at home, enjoy the HD TV. You're not sitting there in 25-degree weather in Buffalo. Look, I think what the NFL does, and the way the announcers call the game, the way it's covered is just so beautiful. I don't like it when people say, oh, it's the media's fault for everything. I actually think that NFL films and the media has been one of the biggest reasons why the NFL has had so much success. Or, you get people saying, oh, it's just the players. I actually think that NFL films is the reason why the NFL is on the map.
Absolutely. I mean, we're looking at a sport that back in the day, a good 20, 30 years ago, many would argue, not only many, it would be of the masses that would argue that going to the football game was a much more enriching experience than watching it on television. Now it's been the complete opposite. It taps into as many Americans as possible, and I mean that in a way that it gives you insight on the game that you just can't see in real life. It gives you different angles. It gives you announcers that give you different aspects and different thoughts of the game. And sports media has become so much more, for a number of years, has become a lot more intelligent, and the fans have become much more intelligent as well, as they have had access to to a variety of different sports media, different talk shows, different TV shows involving the NFL. It's become a much smarter fan base of NFL fans, and absolutely, this has become America's sport. America's pastime is baseball, but it has switched because of the fact that it has such an amazing tap on technology that is frankly unbeaten by any other sport in this country.
It has the best announcers. I mean, you can go from Al Michaels. I mean, you got great announcer after great announcer after great announcer, solid analysts. And again, you see those NFL documentaries, with the NFL films, and there's so many iconic moments from the game that it's so dramatic that it's like a man's soap opera, basically. But I want to move on from the great part of sports media to what people call as the black hole of sports media. Some people say social media has ruined the sports media. Some people say you get these hot shots like Skip Bayless, Jason Whitlock, TJ Simers, and they create controversy. What do you think is the biggest black hole in sports media?
I don't know if it's necessarily if I can put my finger on a black hole, but I can definitely give a point here about how much more intelligent the fan base has been. 10, 20 years ago, there wasn't the same level of intelligence as far as fans are concerned. Because fans just, frankly, they know more about the game now. They have more access to reports, to different areas of football media where they can get information in an instant. We're speaking of constant websites, TV shows, Sports Center, NFL Network. There, it goes on and on about TV shows that base a majority of their program on giving the fans information about football. And then when we speak of Skip Bayless, who I just want to give my thoughts here, is definitely gives some weak arguments. A majority of his broadcasts, very weak arguments. I mean, we're speaking a guy that, in my mind, doesn't have the same intelligence of some of these fans out here that don't really have a profession in broadcasting. I mean, as far as the dark hole goes, we can throw in Skip Bayless there, but we're speaking of a number of people that know more about the sport, we can say, than some broadcasters are that have big time careers in sports business because of how intelligent these fans have become, because they have such good access to reports and different levels of communication with the NFL.
What's so disappointing?
Skip Bayless.
No. That's what I have to say. Okay. Skip Bayless has the greatest. He won the greatest scholarship any media member could ever have. He's a Grantland Rice scholar, and Grantland Rice is the greatest journalist in the history of sports journalism. And unfortunately, he gets paid to take shots at people and in basically a bar room debate with Stephen A. Smith, who has an obligation to throw people under the bus, especially when he mumbles and stumbles through saying Kwame Brown. I could do that impersonation, but I'm not going to do it here. I think social media has helped, but the problem is, I think there are too many journalists or announcers that feel like they have so big of a voice that they completely forget about what they've learned, and they pretty much lost all their credibility by making big statements. And I think that some NFL, well, not just NFL analysts, but some analysts have too big of a voice. Like Warren Sapp says some things that are kind of borderline bad most of the time. You get guys, Jalen Rose has said some things in the NBA or as an analyst that have been borderline, you could say, racist to some people. So again, I just feel like some announcers have too big of a voice. Do you believe that as well, or do you think the balance of power is basically all the same?
No, there's a number of broadcasters who make headlines for making ridiculous, out there statements that have nothing to do with anything. And in my mind, I think Skip Bayless, as much as you can call him a sports and football broadcaster, I think his occupation is a lot more fitting as just arguing against Stephen A. Smith and creating a counter argument, whether it makes sense or not. Making a counter argument against Stephen A. Smith, I think that makes a lot more sense here than him being called a broadcaster. Because in my mind, I mean, he's just one of the few broadcasters that create such out there points where their occupation is more making money and headlines versus making a solid argument. And fans that have begun much more intelligent are starting to catch on and starting to be aggravated like you and me, Cameron.
Yeah. You just went on a rant right there. Let's move on because we're giving ESPN too much grief. Let's go to Fox Sports. We're being too mean to them right now. Okay, let's go to Fox Sports 1. It's a new network for Fox Sports. They're challenging the four-letter network, like people call it, or the mothership, ESPN. Do you think they stand a chance in such a tough market? I mean, with all the big names that they've got, or really the big beast? You can't stop the big beast in Bristol, Connecticut.
No, absolutely not. I just think that this is one of the many ideas that people have on sort of the American dream on uprooting the beast or the Goliath of football or of sports or of any big time market. I just don't think they stand a chance. But obviously, I mean, they could prove me wrong. But I just don't see it.
They've got big names, but come on, you can't really call yourself credible if you're putting Regis Philbin on a big time prime time spot as one of your shows.
Right there. That's going to beat the big market of the NFL. I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, come on, Regis Philbin. He's way too biased about sports, and again, I feel like it's a little bit. They're trying to make it a little too over-commercialized, and I don't think fans really appreciate that. They want genuine broadcasts, not this over-commercialized, we're just going to get big names and see what can happen. No, it's all about chemistry and so much more to make great broadcasts. And I don't think Fox Sports 1 really has that ability. I mean, if they prove me wrong, great. If they don't prove me wrong, then, well, I'm right. So...
yet again, obviously.
So, let's move on to biogenesis. A lot of people are saying that this is also in other sports as well. This isn't just in the MLB. Porter Fisher was the guy who really came out and said, these guys are taking biogenesis. They came to our anti-aging clinic. Tons of players, MMA, NBA, so many sports, but MLB has the most. Even Porter Fisher says that high schoolers are even taking these substances as well. Have you, as a sports fan, just said, here we go again with baseball or any other sport, cheating? What? Just go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think I go back to my argument to top off the show, where football just seems to be way ahead of its time. Not only ahead of its time, but it seems like baseball is just so behind, and they just don't have it right with these PED scandals. And I want to add in the argument that they aren't even handling the gambling of certain managers and GMs. They aren't managing that well, because we're talking about a guy like Alex Rodriguez that just is taking away from the game with all of his off-the-field issues, the PED scandals, etc. There are a number of players that are tied behind that. And my question here is, why does the MLB have such a harsher, strict penalty on gambling versus PEDs? Because the reason why they do penalize both of those incidents is because of its direct impact on the game. In game number 150 of an MLB season, when a team's trying to make the playoffs, obviously a player who has PEDs is going to feel like game number one. He's going to feel fresh when everyone else is obviously fatigued from a long season. And the reason why they don't have gambling as well, they tried to prohibit gambling, is for the same cause. It's direct impact. But in my mind, I think PEDs have a much more direct impact. And then when we see people that gamble, they're out of the sport for their lifetime, versus a guy like Alex Rodriguez, when the MLB has like complete, like, they can see the evidence that can give Alex Rodriguez the boot out of the MLB, and chances are he may only serve a 1-year suspension, maybe 1.5 years, and will be right back in the sport. I think it's a shame, and I think baseball is just way behind its time as far as not only with media, but also giving just punishments to all of its players and front office.
Yeah, I think fans, and I'm really tired with this whole game, just this cat and mouse game with baseball. It's really, they have so many double standards, and I don't feel like they hold people accountable enough. You see these other successful leagues, and you say, wow, they're holding guys accountable. That's why people don't get in trouble in their respective leagues. Here, come on. I mean, it's really gotten to a ridiculous level. I mean, fans, you can't even fill the stadium up. You're going to fill the stadium up with a 162-game season? I love the NBA, but personally, you can't fill up an 82-game season every single night. To me, this is kind of a little bit... They need to tone it down. They need to hold people more accountable. And you know what? It's driving fans out. And they're really in a predicament, and they're in some huge trouble. Now, speaking of biogenesis, I've heard, few players are taking it in other leagues, but it's really not as big of a deal because it just may be 1 or 2 players, and according to, let me see here, Porter Fisher, he says that there aren't any superstars in any other leagues taking it. Should those leagues crack down on those 1 or 2 players, even if they're not the big superstar, or do you think it's just an issue that they don't have to worry about?
Well, I just think that where baseball has it wrong and other sports have it right is that baseball has such an inconsistent penalty as far as players that are cheating and managers that are cheating as well, and they're. With their goal of trying to create a fair and just environment, I have no clue what they're trying to do here. With the different types of punishments where players can negotiate having less time for obviously taking PEDs and biogenesis and what have you. I think this is a place where just baseball has it wrong, just straight up has it wrong as far as trying to punish players. And in my mind, I don't think it matters as far as having the superstars or not punished the same. If you are taking performance-enhancing substances, you need to face the penalty because you are frankly adjusting the game into your favor in an unjust and unfair way.
I totally agree with you there. I feel, and again, you talk about the penalties, inconsistency. I just wonder if baseball is ever going to catch up. Like, whenever I think of baseball compared to other sports, I think of old, run down, just outdated. Just personally, I think it's outdated where baseball has become. I feel like baseball tries to rely too much on its past. They keep saying, oh, it's America's national pastime. Well, you know what? Stop trying to live your past. Try to live the future, or try to live the present now, today, with what people want and what the league should be. Stop trying to live off of a reputation, and I think that's the biggest thing that's ruining baseball.
One fact I do want to add as well is that we talk about sports that are hitting their fan base, and believe it or not, the NHL is doing a fantastic job. They aren't getting necessarily, as of yet, the kind of fan base that they frankly deserve. Excuse me, because they've done a fantastic job at broadcasting, advertising their sport, and also creating technology into their sport. We're talking about a sport that does a better job as far as instant replay than the NFL does. Every goal is under review from a general replay booth. And this is just one of the many aspects. We're also talking about the NHL advertising as it's like the world against us. We have a much more violent game. It's just it's such an out there sport. They do a great job luring in fans to their sport. And that's something that the MLB, frankly, doesn't do. They have a very tough time agreeing with the different mindsets that certain fans have, that a lot of fans have in the baseball fan base. And in my mind, at the end of the day, the NFL does a good job of this, along with the NHL, the NBA to a certain degree, where they adjust their game to safety, first and foremost, but also to the fan base and to what they want to see. That's why we see it's a league in the NBA that's no longer run by centers in the NBA. Obviously, then the NFL, it's a passing league, and it just overall, as far as advertising and what have you, baseball is just behind. They don't have any sort of tap on their fan base.
Yeah, I want to move on to another topic that makes a lot of people, and this will tie into what I'm going to talk about as well here. Referees officiating. It is such a big deal in sports, particularly the sport I talk about on here, the NBA. I mean, it fires me up sometimes when I see Bennett Salvador, Joey Crawford, Dick Bavetta. Those are my top 3 worst refs in the entire sports world, because I feel like NBA refs lack the integrity necessary. You look at Dick Bavetta hugging, kissing players. Come on, okay? Don't try to be the grandfather of the league. You don't have that obligation. I personally think with the NBA, they should have a separate agency where this agency will monitor all referees and their actions, because it's gotten to a point where many have conspiracy theories about the NBA, calling it fixed. I don't think the NBA is fixed, but I think these referees are making it seem to many conspiracy theorists that it is. What do you think about other sports? Do you think that all sports should have a separate agency where the refs are monitored in everything that they do?
Well, you give some fantastic points, and I think that's a very solid argument as far as how to monitor refs and how to create a much more fair game. We're also we talked earlier about performance enhancing drugs, and now we go on to how officiating as well needs to be a much more fair, much more even keel environment for every NBA team. And you will notice that I've noticed throughout the NBA playoffs last year, there was an argument about how the games seem to be swayed into some degree. That's been the argument for years upon years, that games seem to be swayed by officiating. But I do want to add 2 arguments here. One is for, one is against. Typically, officials, similar to broadcasting, similar to anything, sometimes there are certain officials. Chad Johnson is much notable as of late to being the NFL's version of this argument here, but they seem to be bigger than the sport. See, they seem to be trying to make themselves bigger and more important than the sport itself. And you mentioned a few officials that have done more than their fair share of that. But I also want to add the point that, in a way, officials seem to be held to a higher standard to some degree than players, because these are just human beings too.
Yeah.
We're talking about officials that are supposed to monitor a faster game in all aspects, and they're supposed to catch on the fly and supposed to make instant calls, and they're ridiculed if they don't make that call right on the fly. They are just humans too. Humans have off nights. Humans make mistakes as well. I think that's why, obviously, baseball has got it wrong about instant replay. But on this subject, I just think they're held to a higher standard than they need to be.
No, I don't think so in the NBA. I really... Look, there are a few referees I like. I like the Tony brothers. I like Monty McCutcheon because with those guys every night, it's consistency, it's integrity. When you see with Joey Crawford and what Dick Bavetta, he committed a crime in 2002 to the Sacramento Kings, Game 6. Everyone knows that game, yes, that game was fixed, and there is actual a court case for that game. You wouldn't believe it. It is true. Go research it. But it just seems like with NBA officials, look, I get it. If you miss a call, great. But when there are obvious calls, okay, obvious calls in games, and it starts to become a little bit of a trend, and the way the referees act in front of players is somewhat inappropriate, they should be questioned. And NBA officials, and I love the game of basketball, I play it, I play it seriously, like, I play it in an organized setting, so it makes me so upset because in high school, in college, look, basketball is the hardest sport to officiate. I don't know if you'd agree with that. Do you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, basketball, but there's got to be if a referee is talking with another player and, you know, hugging or just saying nice things or, you know, like I heard Dick Bavetta give cookies to one coach but not the other. This was on Outside the Lines. I know this is ridiculous, but it's true. Those actions bother me. And I don't see that with any other sport. Do you see it with the NFL? You talk about the NFL so much. What do you see in officiating there?
I don't see that level of inconsistent play. The only time that I saw bad officiating was when we had the replacement officials last year for the first 6 weeks. But with that case being made, it was very consistent. It was consistently bad, but officiating was very consistent throughout the NFL. That's a job that has been under the radar. The NFL has done a fantastic job bringing officials that they regulate a very fair and very well officiated game. Some fans would disagree, but they run an extremely high-paced and well-run game that the NBA, frankly, doesn't from time to time. I make an argument that referees are held to a higher standard, but that is to a certain degree. And certainly the NFL is, in some cases, that's more relevant to that sport than to the NBA. I think you make a very valid point to where certain officials seem to be altering the game. We see that. It's an argument that you can't really make with the NFL, but with the NBA, it's much more apparent where you see games that are won and lost based on calls late in the game or, frankly, calls throughout the game, where you will see 30 free throw attempts from one team and then 4 from another. And to be honest, it was the exact game played on both sides as far as throughout the lines from whistle to whistle in the NBA.
Yeah, and by the way, some have even told me, then they've said, hey, this NBA final last year with the Heat Spurs, some are saying, oh, the fix was in. The NBA wanted the Heat to win. No, trust me.
That was the one NBA Finals where it was very well officiated from side to side. That was just late, Game 6 and Game 7 won by the Heat, not by the officials.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But do you, and this is with college basketball officials too, because there have been very questionable calls in college basketball and sometimes in college football. And I've heard that the training isn't as extensive as the pro level, and some of these officials have to do 2 games back-to-back or 2 games in one day, traveling across the country, tired, weary. That bothers me because I don't want a tired official out there. In the NFL and the NBA, they're not working games back to back, and they are well trained. I don't see that with college athletics. Do you think that college sports and officiating needs just as an extensive training program, just like the professional sports?
Yeah, you actually make a very good point, and I have some sort of a basis on this issue, having a neighbor just a couple doors down that does indeed officiate on a high school basis, not on a college or collegiate level, but on a high school basis. But it's a similar point here. He spends numerous hours every day going to an officiating clinic to learn his game. It's a craft in and of itself. We will. That's first and foremost. It is a very high technical craft, being an official in a major sport, and I see him consistently exhausted from the work that he puts in, because it's a very hard sport to be an official. Not many people know that, but to your point here, Cameron, I do want to say that officials seem to be again put in some cases on a higher standard, where they have such a rigorous schedule that it's asking for mistakes versus being eased into the program and being able to have their own schedule where they can make the right calls, where they're alert on a night-and-night basis as far as the NBA and the NFL are concerned, and their collegiate sports as well.
You mentioned your neighbor in high school sports there. I gotta ask you this. With high school sports and just sports at the younger level, at the younger AAU for basketball and other club sports, do you think that kids are being pressured by these superstar athletes and parents and where do you see the state of high school sports?
I'm a little confused by the question about being pressured. Elaborate just a little bit.
Well, with athletes, they're being pressured by coaches who I'm going to be
absolutely.
Yeah. Whoa, wait 1 second real quick. Some of these coaches, let me remind you, don't have that much credibility. You look at them and you say, really, this guy thinks he knows football? This guy thinks he knows X sport? Do you think that athletes have way too much pressure to handle?
Yeah, the learning curve is absolutely steep as far as a high school athlete. And you mentioned coaches that are, in some cases, these high school coaches are putting in the same work that NFL coaches and college coaches are putting in, as far as creating not only for a practice environment, but working with the school, creating game plans. Their whole day is wrapped around creating a playbook and creating their best opportunity to win in their high school sport. I'm around a high school that wins year in and year out, and this is a coach that has very, very little off time. Highly competitive, and that sort of competitive nature falls on the players. This is a sport highly demanding, not only with football, but also with basketball and what have you. There are a number of sports that I notice on the high school level, just from my local school alone, that this is a steep learning curve as far as pressure putting on the athletes, and also their families are supposed to adapt as well to such a rigorous environment where day in and day out, if you don't perform, you're off the team, or even worse. It's a very high pressure scenario, and I think there's a lot of pressure and scrutiny put on these players, and I think it starts with the coaches, where if you don't perform, I don't even turn my head for someone that's still putting in a day in and day out the kind of work that the people that play do.
Yeah, I play for a high school coach, basketball. He's got a lot of credibility, and he's played high school, college. He understands the game inside and out. We break down tape, and in his voice, and you could sense a lot of frustration because, look, our school knew, kind of getting used to things, but in general, when I see some of these coaches, and I know they prepare, I get that. But the treatment of players is really not standard.
It's rigorous, yeah, and it's
Yeah.
not, in some cases, you could say is unfair.
Yeah, I feel like they, you know what, and then the coach that I play for, sometimes he blames it all on us, which is fair at times, and sometimes he says it's kind of my fault. You know what? I don't see that with coaches enough. They always put it on the players, and sometimes they should share some of the blame and say, "Hey guys, put it on me." With the state of high school sports and club sports and at the lower levels, I feel like, and this is what I want to segue into, the styles of coaches, just in general, the way they talk. Because there are nurturing coaches, there are coaches that love positive energy, and there are some coaches like the Bobby Knights of the world that they want to threaten for success. That's what I call it, threaten for success. And I don't know, which style do you think contributes to bigger and better goals at the end of the day?
In the past, I would by far and away say threaten, to, forcing on a mental toughness, a number of aspects around that quality was the way that it works as far as coaching goes. But nowadays, where we see so much winning going to coaches where they base their game plan, base their coaching style around the players. We see just last year the Harbaughs made it to the Super Bowl, and they're very nurturing. They're very nurturing coaches where they understand the players. I mean, in fact, we see so many teams that struggle year in and year out where they place such a burden on the players. The New York Jets with such a tough coach and such a tough, absorbing, just on you day in and day out staff. There has to be a bottom line where you have to say, look, at the end of the day, this is just a game. It doesn't need to be any more important than that. And sometimes I just think, starting from high school, there is too big of a burden on players that, in some cases, I mean, I don't want to go deep on this argument, but in some cases, you see where after their sport, you see players enter a mode of almost depression.
Yeah.
Almost their life ends after that state because of how mentally demanding it has been. I don't want to tie this in necessarily or go deep onto the Junior Seau situation, but we saw a guy who, after his career, his life was just over because of how demanding for his entire life the sport of football has been on not only his family but himself, where his life wasn't the same anymore. And in a lot of cases, you see this with the military as well. Such a demanding day in and day out process that just wears on you, and in some cases, it takes it too far.
Yeah, I personally, and you're making some NFL references. You know, it's one thing to challenge. You know, you see with the New England Patriots, they challenge in a professional way. To me, I think you look at some of these they don't do it in a professional way. When you start getting personal, that's when you cross the line. And I think with some of these high school coaches, I want to go back to high school real quick, that's what it comes down to. When things start getting personal, that's when problems happen. And some of these bad coaches who take things personally and really say some personal insults to their players and belittle them, if they think they're going to win a championship, they're clueless.
Absolutely. Honestly, I also have some light on this. I just want to touch on this subject real quick. Me being a former high school football player as well, this hits at home because I played football for 4 years, and I stopped because of how demanding it was on the coaching staff and how little, as far as high school goes. I understand it's a very competitive sport, but I quit playing because of just how demanding it was on you, and how if they didn't get what they wanted, I'm speaking of the coaching staff, and if they didn't see you in the way that they want to see you, where they didn't get anything out of you, they wanted nothing to do with you. I did not feel, me speaking to my own personal interests, I did not want to continue playing for a coaching staff that was so highly demanding day in and day out of you. And in the end, you didn't get the same reward that the coaches got. They got the championship. They got all the notoriety. This coach is one of the greatest in the area that I actually have the honor of at least meeting. But at the end of the day, it was about me because I'm playing for him. And at the end of the day, I was not respected. And I felt like there was much more better things to do with my time versus playing for a coach that was so much about winning that he didn't really give two cares about his own players.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm speaking from a personal side here. My high school coach, he cares about winning, but he values team chemistry, I mean, to a pretty high standard. He doesn't want bad things, necessarily. Like, there are some coaches say, all I care is to win. I mean, you see, I hate calling out a coach, but he's had a lot of success. He's from modern day. You see these like modern, we don't care about your feelings, we just care to win. It's just all junk, and it's all BS. Just be real with the players, be genuine. You're going to lose players, and you're going to have a bad name for yourself at the end. So might as well be genuine and be nice in the process. I really don't like the way. Do you feel like coaches become too big for their teams? I'm not just talking about the NFL level or professional, but at all levels.
Too big for that. To be quite honest, that is signified what we've been, what we've touched here on this subject, where just some certain, and this ties into the whole show. There's some times that in certain professions, people seem to be better than the surroundings that they're in. They try to make themselves bigger than what the situation calls for. And from time to time, certain coaches, they value their own personal success over the likeness of others, and they don't mind sacrificing a few players year in and year out that will not play for them strictly because this coach is so absorbed around winning and just creates such a suffocating environment that the players don't really have the same level of appreciation of the sport that the coach does.
Last thing, are you willing to call out your coach here on Spreaker.com?
I think this is he has won for the better part of the last decade. He obviously, he's a very well-respected guy and has created a lot of success for himself and also his family over the years with how great he has done in the high school game. He has won I believe it has been three not state championships, but CIF conference championships in our area over the last 5 or 6 years. I don't know if I have the statistics right to a T, but year in and year out, his regular season record is, if not perfect, very close to that. His name is Coley Candell. You guys can look him up. He is a very, very well-renowned coach, but just a very suffocating environment that he creates. And in my mind, I just wanted nothing of it.
Thank you, and basically you just told us the big lesson that if that's all you wanted to get from the show was the lesson that Nick Rice taught everybody here today, and basically the theme of the show. So, beyond the box score with Cameron and Nick, we may continue this longer. We just wanted to try it out to see how it goes, and please listen to more shows on Spreaker.com. Do you know when your next show is, or you don't know right now?
I don't know yet, but it could be next time, maybe even this weekend. But also, I want you guys to also real quick just chiming in for a quick minute here. A majority of the national sports radio station for Spreaker.com is going to be in Los Angeles for a annual sports broadcasting camp, and you can catch them throughout the entire week next week. This is the week starting, I believe it's August 5th, somewhere around there, where they're going to start creating a daily show for you on Spreaker.com, national sports. Make sure to tune in, guys, and also make sure also to catch show number 2 of Beyond the Box Score if we do bring you yet another episode of this show. Fantastic show number 1, Cameron. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on, and yeah, we will have huge shows. I mean, if you were there, well, you were there, but those of us who've been following us from the great 1000 Mics days, you probably know how big the shows are. So they're pretty long, but if you stay with us, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Beyond the Box Score with Cameron and Nick. Have a great night, and see you later.